City Sounds. Creating podcasts, creating podcasters.
Hello, and welcome to the pilot series. Gen Z Love is a podcast that focuses on the complexities of modern dating for the Generation Z, hosted by me, Manav Pallan. We look at topics including benching, breadcrumbing, ghosting, and something called freckling. This podcast will speak to a number of Gen Zs, exploring why they do these things and how they feel. We'll also speak to a number of experts to understand why dating in this generation is so difficult. I hope you enjoy the show. What you heard there was Rigby, my 2.5-year-old dachshund, who I walk 3 times a day. There's nothing I love better than putting on my boots and going for a relaxing stroll around the park next to my house. My walk with Rigby gave me time to think about one of the other big loves in my life, romantic comedies. I always loved the big declaration of love scenes in rom-coms. I watched How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days for the millionth time last night, and my favourite scene is the ending. I can picture it now. Matthew McConaughey risking his life riding a motorbike really fast through traffic just to catch up with the girl of his dreams so he can tell her how he really feels about her. That prompted me to think about my generation and why that scene would never be replicated in any of our love lives. Telling someone you love them, or even just how you feel about them, is something my generation struggles to do. Hi, I'm Manav Pallan, and I was born in 2003, smack bang in the middle of Gen Z. I'm part of the largest generation of people on Earth right now. We're the most connected generation in history thanks to the internet, yet this technology has made us feel like relationships carry less meaning. We would rather ghost someone and cease all contact or communication rather than tell someone how we really feel. Welcome to the first episode of the Gen Z Love podcast. In this episode, we explore the topic of ghosting and why this silent exit hurts so much.
It's like a real knife to like my moral character. When somebody comes, I think our generation would describe it as dead chat. You feel like, okay, I'll just switch off from this conversation. So yes, I have ghosted. Am I proud of it? No.
That was Henry. He's Gen Z just like me. And I met him in a nearby coffee shop to get a better sense of what ghosting really means.
I think ghosting is never turning up to a comment, to a message. It's never replying. It's not responding to somebody. It's removing them from your life in a really shallow way that essentially means you don't have time for somebody or you don't have the effort for somebody. And it's a fairly snap decision, right? You just look at a message on your phone and go, I'm not responding to that. Or, oh, I've got these other people, they're more interesting. So it's this ticker of this attention economy that you switch off and you move on to something else. And I think it's a real problem.
As someone who's been ghosted before, I agree with Henry's definition. I'm a hopeless romantic and I believe all declarations and rejections of love should happen face to face. I think there's never a good reason to ghost anyone, because every time it happened to me, it made me ask myself, what did I do wrong? Was there something wrong with me? I thought my experiences with ghosting were unique, but as it turns out, this is a much bigger issue than I realised. According to my research, an incredible 78% of Gen Z have been ghosted, much more than millennials at 68%. And 2/3 of people who have been ghosted have done it to someone else. This made me wonder, how could people in my generation be so careless and not consider other people's feelings?
There's often this idea that people who ghost are kind of like, they have no regard for other people's emotions and I don't really care. But you have to, like, there's a reason why somebody's gotten to that stage, and often it's more of a protective method, I'd say, than trying to actively hurt somebody.
The voice you heard there was Lauren. She answered my call out where I was looking for people who've ghosted more than once to reach out. This was a personal question for me because I've been ghosted multiple times. Lauren told me that she's ghosted 6 guys before, and I wanted to find out if there was ever a good reason for doing so. She shared a story about one guy she was talking to who kept crossing the line.
We didn't really know each other that well. I was like, okay, I get it, but maybe there should be like a boundary here. And he was like asking like really personal questions, whatever. And then he kind of like was offloading about like all of his issues and like life and whatever. And it got really, really personal. And obviously I was like, yeah, you know, I understand, but we didn't really know each other that well. That didn't really stop. And then it got worse. And then like he would reach out to me on like other forms of social media. So I had him on Instagram, and then he like found me on LinkedIn, and he found me on he found my Snapchat without, I didn't even know how. And at that point I was like, okay, it's time to just air him out of nowhere. If the exact same situations happened in real life that happened on social media, there's absolutely no way that like I'd be able to just like walk off from it. Like I would just find it more difficult to do that.
I guess that's the whole point of ghosting, right? It allows you to cut off all contact with someone without having to face them. But looking back now, when it happened to me, I wonder if I should have confronted them about it. Would it have brought me closure? Or maybe make them reconsider doing it to someone else in the future?
It was quite hostile at the time. It was like through a phone call.
That's Martha. She's one of my closest friends. I consider her a really kind and thoughtful person, and it always surprises me that someone like her can ghost so easily. It was interesting to find out that she's actually been confronted before. Hearing her experience made me feel really sorry for her. I never considered that there could be consequences for people who ghost.
Yeah, and it wasn't until recently that I've actually had someone confront me about my behaviour. It was quite hostile at the time. It was like through a phone call, and then I got 2 missed calls. And usually I wouldn't answer, but something was telling me to pick up.
Maybe ghosting isn't as black and white as I thought it was. After speaking with Henry, Lauren and Martha and reading research papers on this topic, I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it anymore. On one hand, I've spoken to 3 people from my generation who've swayed my opinion on the topic a little. But on the other hand, the scars of ghosting are still quite fresh for me. After all these conversations, I'm left wondering, why am I still hurt by my experiences of ghosting? I need to speak to an expert who can help answer my question. I spoke to Professor Kipling Williams, a psychology expert. He spent 30 years researching the effects and consequences of ostracism, what we've come to define as ghosting. One of the first things I wanted to know was, why does ghosting hurt so much?
We are very sensitive to being ignored and excluded. We pick up on it really quickly and negatively. It actually activates the same regions of the brain that are activated when you experience physical pain. So if you put your hand on a flame or an ice cold water, or you prick it with a pin, you activate the same center of the brain that's activated when the person is not paid attention to by other people. That's sufficient to do all sorts of things, including activating the pain centers of the brain. It threatens a person's sense of belonging, their self-esteem, their need for control, and their need for acknowledgement and meaningful existence. So these are 4 fundamental needs that psychologists have studied for years. They're a need because without them, you suffer not only psychologically, but physically.
With her consent, I shared Lauren's story with Professor Williams and told him that she'd cut off all communication with someone she was speaking to online because she felt it was a safer option.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people think it's kinder or more humane to ignore someone than to say something that's potentially hurtful. And our research says it's quite the opposite. You'd rather have a response and an explanation than nothing at all. It's so frustrating to have just a blank wall to speak to and get no response that it can amplify aggression and volatile reactions.
I found the professor's words to be quite shocking, as, until now, I thought that ghosting meant you could avoid potential aggression, but I guess I've got that the wrong way round. Ghosting just makes the problem worse. Before I let Professor Williams go, I had one final question I wanted to ask him. Why does ghosting feel so natural to Gen Z?
We're not finding any generational differences in terms of how people respond to ostracism. And even though I've been studying it for 30 years, the phenomenon's been going hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, even animals engage in ostracism, and social animals. So it's a ubiquitous phenomenon that's been around, and it's probably tied evolutionarily to survival. Animals who were ostracized by their herd or their pride or whatever group they're in usually die within a couple of days. So that our sensitivity to ostracism is probably evolutionarily based. So I do think the form in which ostracism can happen has changed over the last 30 years, because with the advent of social media, it's opened more possible ways to be rejected or ostracized. But at the same time, it's also opened doors for connection. I mean, people can connect to groups, to other people, the dating apps, so much easier than before. I mean, you can just sit in your room and swipe left or right, and you've formed a new potential relationship, or you join some group online. But with every new way of connecting, that means there's a new way of being disconnected.
Speaking with the professor was a real eye-opener. I now know why ghosting hurts so much. The fact that it activates a part of your brain that feels physical pain is so interesting and makes so much sense. It explains why, even a year after I was last ghosted, it still hurts when I think about it. He also disagreed with the idea that it's more humane to avoid difficult conversations with someone rather than ghosting them. I'm still amazed by the idea that this is tied to human evolution and nature, that ghosting is not uniquely a Gen Z problem. 3 months ago, when I started on this journey, it came from a personal and maybe slightly selfish place. I was eager to find out why ghosting hurt me so much, and why so many people in my generation do it. After speaking to some people from my generation, I think my stance on it has softened. I might not condone it, but I now understand a lot more why people would do it. The best thing I learnt was from Professor Williams and his thoughts on the topic. It's comforting to know it's not unique to us, that we're not some sort of broken generation who are set on hurting each other. What stuck with me the most was the example he gave about animals who were ostracized from their herd. They ended up dying within a couple of days, and that did leave me wondering, if we're ghosting each other more and more, are we becoming resilient to its effects? We've all been ghosted one time or another, but thankfully, we're all still standing.